That's right, Kansas Jayhawk football leading the show today. And in all seriousness, it is important because the Jayhawks appear to be closing in on making a new hire. That is always something that should be paid attention to around here, especially now because for once, Kansas is making an adult decision. All right, this is no longer passing the mic over to the kids at the kid table. This is no longer letting Jeff Long in between shots of ketchup make a football hire. This is actually a sound hire, it would appear. Yes, a sound hire on paper for Kansas. I don't know who specifically it is going to be yet, but the two names that are out there, Lance Leopold from Buffalo and Jeff Monken from Army, are both the kind of guy that Kansas should be interested in trying to hire to resurrect their football program. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. That doesn't mean I'm sitting here telling you today that it's something you should be particularly worried about. But the contrast is Kansas has had just like a circus show be their football program for, almost 15 years by this point. When did Mangino leave? He was out in like 2009. So we're going on like 13 years of just a carnival, a circus, being the Kansas football program. The jokes wrote themselves. You didn't have to do anything. You just had to let Les Miles step in front of a microphone every single week, and he would bury his program on his own. Jeff Long, for that matter, too, especially the way his tenure ended. Just stick a microphone in front of him, put a camera in front of him, and he's going to do all the harm that you need them to do to hurt their program. Kansas's approach now is to actually be competent. It's still a crapshoot. I mean, coaches are hired all the time, and schools have to hire coaches all the time, and it's still a crapshoot as to whether or not the guy is going to be a success. So I'm not sitting here saying, like, Kansas has the guy, they have the next Bill Snyder, they're going to get this thing turned around. No. But they do have a much better chance. They stand a much better chance today or tomorrow when it looks like the hire is going to be officially announced. They stand a much better chance tomorrow of actually having somebody that can bring them to respectability than they did at any point over the last 13 years with the lineup of bozos that they've rolled out there as their football coaches. So that is something that needs to be paid attention to. And that would be my overarching theme here, and my biggest point and takeaway about it is, and Bruce Feldman, by the way, is the one that really has been reporting on this from Fox Sports. Kansas coaching search is close to wrapping up per sources. The front runners are Lance Leopold and Jeff Monken, who've won big and sustained success at places that rarely had any, and each has support among the KU lettermen. They said Skip Holtz is also in the mix. But again, it seems like a lot of this has been focused on Leopold and Monken. I mean, unequivocally, if it's one of those two, will be the best hire that Kansas has made in 2 decades. It will be the best hire that Kansas has made in 2 decades. Because Leopold, if you're unfamiliar with his resume, he absolutely crushed it. Division III, but he ran like the North Dakota State-esque dynasty of Division III, where he won 6 titles in 8 years. He lost 9 games in 8 years at Wisconsin Whitewater. Then he goes to Buffalo, a place where, ironically, Turner Gill had a modicum of success and got the Kansas job once upon a time, but Turner Gill was 20-30. That's not Leopold. He was much better. Went to 3 straight bowl games at a place that had only been to 2 all-time. He was 24-10 his last 3 years there. He was somebody that had us scared thinking about Buffalo. They were supposed to be on the Don-Con schedule for K-State this past year, but COVID obviously changed those plans. And it had me very worried about that game. We were talking about that in our little K-State media group text going on. Guy's been pretty good. And Buffalo, that ain't an easy place to recruit. You trying to recruit to Buffalo, New York to go play football? Like, good luck. Good luck. That's a program that's been pretty decrepit. So, big-time winner, program builder. Didn't do it overnight. Took him 3 years to really get it up and running at Buffalo. And then Monken at Army, another guy, took him a couple of years to really get it up and running, but now has Army humming. And they clobbered Houston. I mean, they got Major Applewhite fired at Houston by putting like 70 on him in a bowl game. And they took Oklahoma to overtime. They took Michigan down to the wire. They've played really tough in non-conference games and gone to a bunch of bowl games. And I was about to say gimmicky. I guess it is kind of gimmicky, like they run the triple option. That would be a different kind of look, and honestly a strategy that I've always thought, like if you're Kansas and you're that bad, it'd be worth exploring, trying to do it a somewhat unconventional way. I mean, like K-State is in some ways doing that just by being the team that runs the ground and pound offense, the A-gap power offense from North Dakota State. It still is representing being the change-up to the fastball that everybody else has in the Big 12. So they're not perfect. I don't think you have to worry about, like, next year Kansas passing you as a program, but you do now have to pay more attention to them instead of just realizing, in the past you could just look over there and be like, whatever, it's the local drunkard at the bar who's going to drink himself silly on wine and just run around and say a bunch of stupid stuff and be an idiot all night. You don't really need to pay much attention to it. Well, now it's somebody that's at least going to conduct themselves like an adult human being. That's what's happened with Kansas. Now it's somebody that can handle their liquor a little bit and act like an adult when you go out at night. So that tells you that Travis Goff is not a total buffoon like his predecessor as the athletic director at Kansas. And I'll be keeping an eye on this. It's going to bring more competition, certainly, than what Les Miles did.
Saying that this coaching search for the Kansas Jayhawks right now, when they're down to maybe a couple of guys, and we're going to get an announcement fairly soon about who the next head coach of Kansas is going to be, saying that already that this is going to be the best hire they've made in 2 decades is maybe one of the most boldest statements you've ever made on this show.
I mean, I really don't think it is. Like, have you paid attention to who's been coaching the Kansas football program?
Yes, and they have hired, even if you look at the past 11 years when they've had 4 different head coaches, in what direction Kansas has gone with those hires, it's been a little bit of everything. From offensive coordinator at Oklahoma to somebody who's had a couple of productive seasons, good seasons at Notre Dame, but they kind of just fell off the face of the earth. A head coach at a MAC school. Sounds like they might get ready to do that again. And then all the way to somebody who's been at the top. He has won the richest prize in the game, has coached in the SEC, but continued the laughingstock of Kansas football without even having to see the product on the field. They've kind of tried everything over the years. I'm not going, oh my goodness, another Buffalo guy who's had success in the MAC. Boy, Kansas has really turned itself around. I mean, yeah, it might be a flashier hire than what we've seen in the past from Kansas.
No, I think it's the exact opposite. I think you're missing the point with that.
Absolutely not. Charlie Weiss, who coached at Notre Dame, had a couple of successful seasons. It just didn't continue. It was like a second chance for Charlie Weiss to coach at a Power 5 level. But I bet you Kansas was very happy to have him. I bet they're happy to have Turner Gill there because he had a tad bit of success. There's a glimpse of hope when you see the resumes of these guys who have come in because they've been somewhat successful. Maybe they can get it done at Kansas. There has been horrible success, none, at Kansas since Mark Mangino left. It didn't matter who they brought in. A lot of guys have tried, and everybody has failed. I will never, ever jump on board with Kansas making a good hire until I see plenty of evidence. I need more than 1 year. I need to see consistency. There's no way I would make that kind of assumption that they've already made a great hire before we even hear the name, before we just see a list of candidates.
I mean, on their way up from what Les Miles was, yes, I think Kansas is on their way up. If it's any name from that list, even some of the others that I was seeing, like Willie Fritz, Skip Holtz, like any of those names, you're going to be on your way up from what Les Miles was. He was an embarrassment. And we sat here for 2 years behind a microphone just telling anybody that would listen, and that wound up being correct. He was a disaster. And the point here, Mitch, is that they're not making the flashy hire. And that's Kansas going against every bone in their body. If you think about what Kansas athletics is as a person, sucking it up and going and taking like a program builder at Buffalo or Army, especially if it's Army, and deciding you're going to run like a triple option or some sort of spread option based offense, like that is swallowing your pride, because mighty Kansas fancies itself as the school that can go out and get the big names, and they want to hang out in their Polo Ralph Lauren Kansas polo and drink wine with a sweater over their shoulders as they watch from the Touchdown Club, or just mosey on over to Allen Fieldhouse. I mean, like, that's what they are. And so it's like, of course, we go get Charlie Weis and we go get Les Miles. I mean, to me, there's only been two types of hires, really, that they've made post-Mangino. It's get suckered in by somebody who's completely in over their head, Turner Gill, again, who was 20-30 at Buffalo, and then David Beatty, who was, I guess there you're trying to pick out, like, somebody that worked with Johnny Manziel, and we think next big thing, but again, taking too much of a chance. And then the other two, Les Miles and Charlie Weis, you're just trying to get a name. That's the mighty Kansas way. And it was dumb. It was very dumb. And so they've led themselves down this path to just bottoming out the program time and time again and getting worse and worse. And now they're here at a point where they're just saying, like, look, enough of this. To me, that's why I think it was Scott Wildcat, I believe I saw say this first. Like, Kansas finally made a hire where, like, the adults were in the room. Like, adults were actually in the room in charge of the decision-making, making this hire. And that's in part because they hired a sane athletic director. Jeff Long was not that. Jeff Long didn't even really have a search last time around for a coach. It was, I just want to go get Les Miles and I'm going to have a TV show based around it. I mean, tell me how that worked out. So this is much different. I don't think you're going to be hiring Lance Leopold and then having some show called Leopold to Go. I don't think that's what's going to happen here. It doesn't mean that I think they're going to win instantly, but it means that I think over the long term, there's a better chance that they get to respectability than what they had before. So that part, I mean, honestly, that part kind of sucks. Like, it's not really fun for me to read that. I was hoping, I mean, I don't know what my real hope was. I don't know who's a bozo coach that's retired. Maybe Kansas would go pursue, like, Steve Spurrier or something. I don't know. Something of that ilk would have been great just to watch the circus again, but clearly that's not what Kansas has. And it's taken them a long time to learn that the hard way, and it may be too late. I mean, you may be exactly right. It'll just be another in a long line of coaches that have come in and failed. Very possible, and I would lean that way. But I think now they at least give themselves like a fighting chance instead of just being a circus show for some TV ratings and a little bit of national attention and terrible, terrible results.